Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm doing another tier list. This time I'm doing Final Fantasy 9 bosses, similar to my Final Fantasy 8 bosses tier. I'm going to rank all the bosses based off of like my memory of playing them, what I think of them, what the boss was like, the overall design, and how they fit into the story. Again, S to D tier. S is the best and D is the most rubbish. There's no real bad bosses in this game because the Final Fantasy games are really well done. But yeah, there's definitely going to be some interesting rankings going on here. I started at the Plant Brain, which I think is really the first boss in the game. Some argument as to whether the earlier fights in the game are actually bosses or not, but they really just teach the storyline. They really just teach you the controls. So I think the Plant Brain is the first boss. Interestingly, in this game, compared to Final Fantasy 8, in Final Fantasy 8 you level up with the monsters, so and each of your characters is more customizable, so the RPG is based around, you know, customizing your characters to fight the foes, so the difficulty curve doesn't really spike too much in that game. Pretty much as hard or as easy as you want it to be. In this game you are restricted by the party members you have, so you've got Zidane, your thief, and he's a physical attacker. You've got Steiner, your warrior, physical attacker, Vivi, your black mage, Daggy, your white mage slash summoner, Eco later on, who's also a white mage slash summoner, more geared towards the white magic than the summoning. Freya is a dragoon, can jump, and is, I think looks like the red mage. I think maybe, yeah, red mage maybe, in a sense, has some, you know, middling magic, some healing and attacking magic. Quina, who's your blue mage, Amarant, who sucked. No, Amarant, who is the I think technically the monk, but can throw things as well. So they are your characters. You can play as Beatrix briefly as well. Spoiler alert. But yeah, they're your main party members, and they all have their own unique abilities and jobs, for want of a better term, which is a term used in Final Fantasy, and they're geared towards fighting certain enemies. It's not until later in the game where you can choose your own party to customize things a bit. You're forced to fight these battles with certain party members unless you decide to. There are certain things you can do which, you know, you can change it up a little bit, but we'll get to them. So the first is the Plant Brain, who I'm going to put straight into B tier. No, I reckon C tier, because it's a pretty forgettable boss. It's the first boss in the game. It takes her forever to build up to. And it doesn't really feel like there's any kind of, like, you've rescued the princess, and then the princess has fallen into the forest, and it feels like this is like the boss of the forest, the plant brain of the forest, but it doesn't feel like it's personal. It's just a bit like, okay, whatever. In this boss you're fighting with Zidane, Vivi, and Steiner. Steiner and Vivi are under leveled. You can level up a little bit with Zidane earlier if you want. You can level everyone up at this point in the game if you want, but it's a real slog to do. And you're rescued by Blank, who's a supporting character, who comes in at the last minute and can do so much more damage than you can. The amount of times I finish this battle just as Blank is through the roof. It throws thunder at you as well. It's a bit of an annoying boss, to be honest with you. I don't particularly like it. And again, no real emotional stakes because it's kidnapped the princess, but there's no like, no, you know, I'm keeping the princess for any reason other than you've got to, you know, rescue the princess from a flipping bug. Bit sucky. Next we have the Black Waltz 1, which is the first Black Waltz, hence the name 1. And you fight this as Zidane on his own. There's a blizzard, and then this monster or enemy will summon Sealion. Now you fight them together. Black Waltz 1's easier. I think he heals himself. I think he might heal the Sealion as well. Really tough because you've got to fight him just as Zidane on his own. Right? He's good at physical attacking, but only has potions to heal himself. You can wipe the Black Waltz out pretty quickly, but I think he's a you know, probably another C tier boss. Nothing to him really. But A tier for Sealion. Now Sealion, I remember at this point in the game it'd been really cool because the boss Black Waltz summoned Sealion, and I thought, wow, the enemies have got summons too. This is going to be so cool. There's going to be a lot more of this in this game. There isn't much of it in the game, but it's really cool anyway. Sealion is a really tricky boss. You'll want to steal his Mithril Dagger because it will teach you Bandit, which enables you to steal more items in this game. Stealing is really cool in this game. It charges up one of your abilities later on in the game called Thievery, which is brilliant, but also the items you can get from stealing allow you to get really good items early and make things a lot more fun and interesting. Yeah, he has this thing where he has this like light on his chest where he'll counter depending on what it is. So the more damage you do, the colour will change, and it counters with, I think, something called Tsunami at the end. So you're going to make sure your HP is high enough to be able to deal with it. So yeah, good fight. A tier for me. Next is Black Waltz II. Black Waltz II is an annoying fight, but in a good way. Like, it's basically, you know, again, it's the first fight you fight where you're all 4 party members, which is your Black Mage, your White Mage, your Fighter, and your Thief, basically, which is the standard 4 characters from the first Final Fantasy game. A bit of an homage to that, are fighting for the first time in a boss. And it has this interesting mechanic where it will counter your fire spells. So, and at that point in the game, or this point in the game, they are the best things you can hit with. So you've got to like work around that. And I put it in B tier. It wipes your male party members out. It will just, I think, put the princess to sleep and wins, which is annoying. So you can't one-shot it, or you can't fight it just as a princess. So that's really annoying. But no, good boss. A good boss. Next is Black Waltz 3. Now, Black Waltz 3 is S tier. Good boss fight. Basically, it flies up in the air, and if you attack it in the air, I think it counters, or it's hard to hit. There's something about it flying in the air anyway. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's you think you can reach it as everyone. I'm not sure. You might not be able to reach it as Vivi, but you don't tend to attack with Vivi, you tend to use magic with Vivi. The build-up to this boss fight is insane. At this point in the game and the story, like the 4 main characters, because you kidnapped the princess, even though she wanted to be kidnapped, they are not getting on. There's some bickering and bantering going on between Zidane and Dagger, who are, you know, there's, you know, a bit of tension between. Steiner hates Zidane, Zidane hates Steiner, and Vivi's stuck in the middle of it all. And at this point, Black Waltz 3 kills a bunch of black mages, and Vivi's just found them, and they look like him. And he's like, I found my kind. And it's in a really, you know, wow, what's he going on? And this monster comes in and kills them all. And he looks like Vivi as well, so it's like, why have you been so evil? Vivi goes ballistic, and all the characters bond for the first time. Like, you know, all these people that have nothing in common, they bond over their common enemy. It's a really good moment, and it's probably the point in the game where I thought I was hooked. When you beat the boss, there's an amazing cinematic where Vivi stands up to the Black Waltz and then crashes it into the side of South Gate, which is this gate you go through in an airship. Really cool cutscene. So S tier for me, I would say. A good boss and a good build-up. Gizamaluke is next. Gizamaluke is a bit dull. I'm going to put Gizamaluke in the C tier because there are 2 ways to fight him. You can either fight him with, at this point in the game you're playing with Freya, your Dragoon, Zidane, Vivi, mandatory. You can also have Quina as a character who's your blue mage. And yeah, I think they've got a big swing on damage they can do. So at the highest random number it can hit really, really good, but then it also hits really, really rubbish. So yeah, they also are the blue mage, so if you've absorbed or eaten different enemies, then you've got different effects. So the game is a lot easier if you have them in your party. But if you want the challenge, you just go to the 3 characters. So Gizamaluke is a pushover with the 4 characters, and that's the way I tend to play the game. So a little bit more challenging with the 3 characters, but annoyingly so. It's an annoying boss. There's nothing really memorable about him. You don't really learn much more about Gizamaluke or whatever it's called. Yeah, good little dungeon, but the boss is a bit disappointing in my opinion. Beatrix is an A tier fight. Now, Beatrix is bigged up in the beginning of the game as being Steiner's nemesis, a knight that's slayed 100 men in battle or 1,000 men in battle, and is basically, you know, the legendary, you know, kind of filling the same role that Sephiroth had in Final Fantasy VII, where it was this legendary warrior. You know, and you learn pretty quickly that she means business because you can't beat her. Throws thunder attacks at you and throws shock attacks at you and stuff like that. You've got to survive 10 turns, and eventually she just does like stock break, which puts you down to 1 HP each. You can't beat her, and it just goes to show how your party has gone so far, but they've got further to go, and it ends the first disc. Really, really good. I wouldn't quite put it in S tier because you can't beat her. It would be nice if you could beat her, but you can't. Fortunately, if you leveled up more, that would be cool. But no, A tier boss, fantastic character as well. Black Waltz 3, you fight again, and I'm going to put this in B tier. Now, it's really cool because Black Waltz, you clearly see by the sprite if you zoom in, is damaged from Vivi's attack earlier in the game. And it feels like you've travelled like really far around the world to get to this boss, but it's actually at the same location, just further down the mountain than you fought him before. and it's I think it's got less HP. It's easier technically, I think. Maybe not, but basically it's weaker than before. But the characters you're using, apart from Steiner who you used before, are not as strong or don't have as good attacks as they did in the first battle. You've got Marcus, who's a thief, who's a supporting character, and Dagger. And yeah, it's trickier. He also can cast freeze on you, which you don't want to happen. But I think if the male characters die this time round, Dagger is pretty much invulnerable because the Black Mage will attack itself. I think, from memory. So it's a bit of a cheese because at this point in the game, the characters you have are really underleveled compared to your main party you've been using at this point in the game. So, you know, well designed, well balanced, but a reasonable challenge because it's not easy to one-shot. So good fun. The next is at the end of Trino, which is my favourite part of the game. The boss is boring. It's this flipping snake who I can't pronounce. And no, it runs away and you can't beat it. And I don't think you've got enough time to steal his items from memory. It's just forgettable as far as I'm concerned. The only thing of note for me was that at this point in the game you can train up on things called Mandragora in the forest outside Trino, or Treno, or whatever you want to call it. And they're a really good monster to train up on, and you can, if you spend loads and loads of time, train up to use Dagger summons. Now at this point in the game, the story is Dagger's afraid of her summons, and the way that that's transmitted in the game is that you need 96 MP to summon the weakest one, which is Shiva. Normally it's like, I think, 8 to 10 MP you need for in standard gaming. It's something you should be able to do a few times a battle, but of course because she's frightened of them, it takes so many MP, and they didn't lock them out because they wanted you to understand that as a character she had access to them, just couldn't for some reason use them, which was a really clever way of, you know, designing it into the game from a narrative perspective. Really cool. But you can actually, if you train up enough, you can use the Eidolon's summons. One shot at the boss. I don't do that often. I've done it once just to prove I could. Yeah, that's my only real memory of that. And yeah, whatever, maybe I'm just bitter because that's how many hours it took me to just see a cutscene I could have got for pretty much free later. Anyway, so the next battle is the Antlion, and the Antlion is a really cool boss. I'm going to put the Antlion in A tier. It's quite tricky, and this is again another one that's even trickier if you just have the 3 party members. I normally have Queena. It's really tricky. It throws a sandstorm thing at you, and I remember it's weak against Blizzard, I think. And it's tricky. You want, I think it's a gold helm, so it's got a really good bit of equipment that you want Zidane to steal. But it's a tricky boss. It's really tricky. It can hit you all at once from memory. And the narrative build up, basically, you know, in this peaceful place, Clara, and this is where things start to go wrong. And Puck, who's a character you've met at the beginning of the game, has been kidnapped by the Antlion. You've got to rescue him, and it's this kind of like, you live in this very like pacifistic society, and you're there, you know, doing the whole "but you must fight if you need to" sort of trope, and you go in and rescue pretty much them from their fate, and then there's a twist. So that's a really good fight. I really enjoy this part of the game, and the arena you're in is like this sand pit, like whirlpool thing, which I think is really cool. So I'm going to keep that in A tier. Next we have Beatrix Part 2, which is going to be in B tier. Not as good as Fight 1. It's the same thing, but you do get a little bit of narrative. You're slightly stronger because when she beats you this time, which is the same thing happens, you get up quicker. So it shows that you've progressed, you know, in that sense. But again, frustrating that you can't actually beat her. You know, and at this point she starts to show some reservations about her actions. Her character gets development, the boss gets development. You know, it's really cool. But you know, not as good as the first fight. The first fight with the shock that the fact that you can't beat her and she's overpowered is just the best. It's the best of the 3 fights the first time you fight her. The next boss is an optional boss called Tantarian, or Tantarian, who I call. You go to Alexandria. In the library there is a book on a shelf, and it's like, you know, "Who dares disturb my slumber? I'm a book, I can talk." It's a bit like that, the Page Master, the movie. But there's like this little bug thing living in the book. Now Tantarian, or Tantarian, I'm going to put in A tier. Now you can fight Tantarian or Tantarian twice in the game. There's only 2 opportunities to fight him in Alexandria's library. The first time is at this point in the game. A lot harder at this point in the game. And the game designers knew what we were doing here. You've got a time limit to get to the princess, but you can beat Tantarian, or I keep calling it different things. You can beat Tantarian at this point, but it's really tricky. It's probably worth waiting for the equipment, because you can steal really good equipment from Tantarian or Tantarian, and you have more time to do it. But, you know, it's a real challenge if you want to beat it at this point in the game. Unfortunately, if you come back for it later in Disc 3, it's not really hard, and you've got no time limit, so it's like a bit of a trade-off. I remember like trying to beat it on Disc 2 the first time I tried, gave up after about 5 attempts, and then came back when I was much higher level on Disc 3 and cheesed it. It just, you know, so I think if you want a challenge, play it on Disc 2. If you don't want a challenge and you just want the equipment, which is worth doing, Disc 3. So next we have Zorn Thorn. Zorn and Thorn are dull, and they go in the D tier. Good characters, you know, court jesters. I like how they talk. One talks in different tense than the other one. They argue between each other, and they're the quirky comic relief characters. I think a little bit of an homage to is it Palam and Porum from Final Fantasy IV? They're like kind of like the antithesis of them in a sense. They're like twins or whatever. Yeah, they're cool characters, but the boss is just boring. They're one of those things like the Turks in Final Fantasy VII, where if you kill one of them, the other one dies. So there's just a bit, you know, annoying. But you've got equipment you can steal from them, and of course you've got a time limit. So it's like, oh, well, I can't be bothered to steal this equipment because I might run out of time. And they're just, you know, they're not designed that well, unfortunately, because they could have been a lot better, in my opinion. It could have been a pretty good grudge match at this point in the game, but they're not. They kind of fizzle out into nothing, in my opinion. Next we have Beatrix Form 3, or third form, which I'm going to put in B tier as well. Same place as the second fight. Same thing really. Again, you fight her again, and then, you know, you get up again quicker, and then she has a change of heart. So it's like, you know, narratively it's cool, but it's the same fight again. You know what I mean? It would have been nice to be able to kill her. I think what would have made this cooler is if you could have actually hurt her, like physically, because, you know, the idea is that she's like above you physically in terms of like strength, and you win her over with your sheer determination, which I like. But at the same time, it would have been nice if you'd like managed to, like, you know, make her bleed slightly or something like that, or, you know, like in Infinity War, with all for a drop of blood, something, you know, with Thanos or something like that, where she just, like, you know, you'd shown your ability to be able to beat her. Because it's frustrating you don't get to have a proper rematch and better her. That's something, because it's like it's building up through the 3 fights and it just kind of fizzles out to nothing. So that's what keeps it off the top higher tiers. But again, a really, really cool character. Again, if they make a remake, I want to see more Beatrix, because Beatrix is a fantastic character. The next one is another snake. Has an oak staff. I think you can steal from it. But what's irritating about this snake, you fight in the same place as the other one. I think it might be the same snake growing up, I don't know. But he curls into a ball and then counters with like an earthquake attack. You're fighting him with Vivi, Dagger and Zidane, and it's just they're not like the snakes, they're just boring, annoying in my opinion. I don't particularly like them. So next we have something else I can't pronounce. It's like blah blah blah, don't know whatever it is. Now this is like the kind of like the XATM 092 boss, where you don't have to fight it, you fight it loads of times, it follows you, kind of thing. And I mean, I think actually I'm gonna put this in B tier, because it's frightening. Like, it's really scary. It looks a bit like those in Return to Oz, those wheeler things. It looks like one of those things, and it comes out of this like cage at the beginning, follows you, and you got all these like scythe things you're running past, and it's a, you know, scary kind of like boss battle, and you're gonna try and run away from it without big fighting it. So it's really, really well designed in that sense. And then it falls over, and then you got to run away from it, similar to the Black Widow in N8. So I think it's really cool. B tier. It's not that memorable, but I don't know if you can actually beat this one. Actually, I think it just eventually falls down a hole. You know, whatever. It's supposed to be a guard of the place you're going into. Next we have Lani. Lani has a big sword. Lani is pretty forgettable. An underdeveloped character for the game. Would have been interesting to see her come back. There's basically a point where like she's Zidane starts flirting with her, and Dagger like scolds him because obviously she's a bit jealous. And it would have been nice to see like her come back as a potential like you know, sort of put maybe a love triangle type thing in. I mean like a it would have been interesting, you know, to have her as actual someone that actually impacted the party. She does come back in the story, but she just feels a bit underdeveloped. It would have been nice if there was some personal stake in it, you know what I mean? In that sense. Or maybe like if Zidane had known her before, she was an ex-girlfriend or something like that, that would have been a really interesting dynamic, I think. which would have been interesting to explore, but you know, it didn't go that way. And unfortunately, Lani was underdeveloped. A very, very good idea for a character though. Again, the character I want to see more of in a remake if we ever get one. Next we have Hilgigars or Hilgigars. And this Hilgigars is probably the first really challenging boss in the game. I'm going to put him in B tier. I remember I've got this like really... I've got a third-party guide of this. I remember looking at the pictures, and they level up around this point, probably because of how hard he is. My memory of him being hard anyway. I mean, like, every time I fight him, he annoys me. Probably because he's got this really, really rare item. It's the fairy flute. It takes forever, and he does this, like, weird walk when he's fighting you in the time of the music. And I think it does an area of effect attack, and then does this, like, bum blast, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. Like a Wario, sort of like it in the floor type thing, to one character. I remember feeling that the game had really jumped up in difficulty. It probably has something to do with the fact that your party changes at this point, because Queen leaves and you get Ico or Eco. So you've got 2 white mages, so your physical attacking prowess is significantly reduced, which is slightly annoying. That's probably a lot of the reason why an Eco is an underdeveloped character, and you're just getting to understand how her abilities work. Next we have the Soulcage. And the Soulcage, another one I'm going to put a B tier. Because this is another one of those, like, it's actually undead, so you can hit a phoenix down, throw a phoenix down here and cheese it. I've never, I think I don't know if I've actually beaten this legitimately without doing that technique. It's annoying because you cast fire, I think it catches on fire and counters with something. And again, because of the party you have, it's just a bit, I don't know, I mean, I can't remember if you can use Queener in this fight, I'm not really sure, but it's just a bit, I don't know, it's just forgettable. I like the build-up in terms of the storyline. So, you know, you go down and it's building up, you go down into this tree, and at the bottom this, you know, the tree's soul cage comes out and it speaks to you with, like, the screen goes black and then the white text comes across the screen, and it, you know, with the old DualShock you could feel the vibration, and it was this horrifying thing that come out of the darkness, and it was built up really well. But the boss itself, you know, easy to cheese, should have been pretty, to me it should have been really like climactic battle, probably. Next we got Amaranth, or I think he's called like Red or something like this at the point in the game, or the like Scarlet Hair or something like that in the game. Amaranth's a pretty boring character. I never use him in combat unless I don't think you actually need to at any point. Do you need to actually use Amaranth? I think maybe technically you do on your way out of Ispen's castle, like if you get a random encounter, but yeah, I think you do have to use him. You do have to use him at points, but he's just a physical attacker. He throws things. Not my favourite character. I don't know why I'm going on about the character, because this is the boss fight. The boss fight's pretty well designed. Again, it's another B tier sort of one, because you're fighting him as Zidane on your own. It's like a grudge match between you and Zidane. Oh, sorry, it's a grudge match between Zidane and Amaranth. And he does this thing where he'll move around the arena, and then he'll say, "I'm coming now," and if you hit him another time, he'll counter, and it's quite tricky, and it's easy to game over if you've not practiced. Yeah, so I remember getting stuck at this quite a bit. It's also the last fight I remember very, very, very vividly from a kid, because I played this part of the game so many times, and I got scared of the eyeball that came next, which is probably an embarrassing thing to say. Right after this, you see this eyeball, frightened me. So the next set of bosses I know really, really well, but not as well as the ones I just talked about, because of how many times I fought them, slightly more in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, no, he's middling. Next we have Ark. Now Ark, I'm going to put in B tier as well. Now Ark you find Oilvert, or Ilver, or whatever it's called. And Oilvert is an interesting place because you need to take physical attackers, because magic doesn't work there. And he throws confuse, it's just something that confuses you, and basically he uses the fact you had to use physical attackers against you, because the physical attackers, if they're confused, hit for big damage, and what confused does is it makes you attack your own party members. So annoyingly good boss in a sense, because I mean, it's not A tier, because again it doesn't really feel like it has anything to do with anything. Ark, you get Ark as a summon later, but there's no real understanding as to why, you know, like it's like there's no like personality of why this Guardian's in Oilvert. It's just a bit frustrating. I mean, I get there's like a part in Oilvert where it's there's different airships, and it's supposed to, I think it's like an earlier model of airships. It's kind of the vibe they're going for, I think, but you know, it would have been nice if there was more stakes in this. Valia Pira, I think it's called, another B tier boss, you know, like again, like probably towards the top of B tier though. B tier, sorry, it's not quite A tier, because it's quite well designed in a sense. You're playing with all the other party members you didn't take to war that are all pretty much all your magical attack people, and it's the build up to the boss is interesting because you can like turn these bloodstones off, and basically you can either make the boss really hard, not turning any of them off, or turn them all off, and the boss is a cakewalk. And I think if this boss runs out of MP, it dies. So if you've got Magic Hammer, I think, which is the ability that knocks down the character's MP or the boss's MP, it will just die. So you know, quite clever that you can do things before the boss to make it easier in the actual boss itself. So well designed in that sense, but the boss itself isn't really memorable. It's just a flipping pillar, no personality, bit boring really. The next thing is Meltigemini. Now Meltigemini, I think, is an A tier boss. The sheer fact that the build up to it's really cool. Kuja kidnaps Aiko, and he has to go in and rescue her, and then there's this fantastic scene where Aiko, her summon Mog, or actually her a little Moogle Mog, turns into the real summon that she is, and you know, Bedine, I think the name of the summon is, and it just absolutely kills Zorn Thorn, who fuse into this one being, Meltigemini. But it's an amazing scene. It's really, really cool, and the ribbon comes down, and it's basically Mog's ribbon, and Mog's always there as Aiko or Eiko's guardian. Really, really emotional scene, and then you fight Meltigemini, or I think you might fight. No, I think you might fight Meltigemini straight after that. And it's, you know, it's a pretty good fight. I think it casts Virus on you, which stops you from leveling up, which is a little bit annoying. But no, a good emotive boss battle, and you finally put the flipping Jesters from before to their death. It would have been nice to fight them one more time as the Jesters before you fought them as Meltigemini. But no, good boss. Really enjoy it, and it was, you know, amazing seeing them fuse into one. Look how horrific they look as an original being, as opposed to these quite quirkily friendly looking things down here. Next is another one I can't pronounce, is like Taharka. I'm gonna put it in C tier because it's just forgettable. Like, it's just this flipping like dragon thing. That the quirk of this dungeon is that it's got Ispin's castle. It's like upside down, and you need to use weak weapons to attack it. You get that down, you pretty much beat it pretty quickly. It's just not very memorable, a bit dull. I think it's got a good item to steal as a flame saber or something. I can't remember what it is. But yeah, whatever. Same with the Earth Guardian. You fight that as Quina and Zidane, and it's just, you know, dull, quite forgettable, this part of the game in terms of bosses. What's annoying about this, and I think it's probably to do with time, maybe time constraints or space on the disc, is that this is the point where your party split off into, there's 8 playable characters. They split off into teams of 2 to fight the 4 Guardians of the World, and you play with Zidane and Quina to fight the Earth Guardian, and you see a montage of the other battles. You don't get to actually fight them. That would have been so much better. Understandable why, I guess, in terms of at the time constraints, but you know, you fight the most boring one, I think, really. Whatever, it's just forgettable, really. There's no real build up to the thing either. The temple, you just go in and fight it. There's no like path to get there. You know, it's a little bit of a shame, because it could have been really, really cool to use like Steiner and Vivi as a combo. Amarant and Freya might have been more interested to fight as Amarant if Amarant only had Freya as support, and then you know, Aiko or Eiko and Dagger. It would have been really cool to fight them all the different ones they fight, but nah, wasn't to be. The next we have, quite a while later in the game, the Silver Dragon. Now, I love this fight. Silver Dragon's going to go to A. It's quite tough, like a massive jump up. Like I think it attacks quite quickly, and most of it attacks the area of effect from memory. It's Kuja's pet that you'd seen earlier in the game. You'd seen him flying around on it. It's nice to actually fight it. Really, really good part of the game. I love the terror part. It's really, really cool. You've just escaped the Pandemonium Palace and finally fought this Silver Dragon that's thrown at you, and then you've got the next part of the boss rush, which is Garland, which is also an A tier boss. In fact, you know, Garland is a bit more passive. I think he throws flare at you. I don't think he has any area of effect attacks from memory. I think he's like one-off attacker, but like, because this first boss has got area of effect and he's got more single attacks, it can, like, unless you heal yourself, it can whip your pie down pretty well for the next fight, which is Kuja, which is also A tier, probably the best of the 3 battles. And you know, finally you're fighting your nemesis, who's been the villain for the last 2 discs, and has pretty much manipulated everything up until this point, and you want it to like really have a go. I mean, it's annoying because at the end of the second disc you go to confront Kuja, and you don't fight him.
There's an amazing cutscene where he gets attacked, but you don't fight him, and he keeps slipping away. And this is the first time you got him cornered, and I seem to remember like he's another one where you can't actually beat him. From memory, you technically beat him, but I think he like does the same thing that Beatrix does, which is a little bit frustrating. But yeah, no, he's a really good boss battle, and I think like it's the build up to fighting him is absolutely brilliant. And afterwards, the realization Garland tells him, which puts him into trance, and the cutscene after that is just absolutely to die for. What a boss rush! Those 3 bosses at the end of the 3rd disc are exquisite. Alright, next we have Ozma, who is the optional super boss. Now I'm going to put Ozma in S tier because it's the hardest boss I've ever fought in Final Fantasy. It's a nightmare. I think of 30-40 attempts. Finally beat it like 5 years ago. It's a really well designed boss. Like they've thought it through. I think it's got 2 ATB gauges, so it's really tricky, and it's so quick. In order to make it doable, you need to be able to absorb. No, hang on. I think you've got to do this like side quest where you get these friendly animals to like. If you rescue all the friendly animals, you talk to all the friendly animals. Ozma comes closer to you when you fight him, and it also gets affected by shadow damage. Before that, it's healed by shadow damage. So you've got to do the side quest to make Ozma easier, so you can throw Doomsday at it. Doomsday is an attack that kills or hurts everyone on the playing field. So if you absorb Shadow, you can keep throwing that at him, and it does quite a lot of damage to him. He's a nightmare though, and when you beat him, the satisfaction after beating Ozma. Omega Weapon is the optional super boss of Final Fantasy VIII, but I think Ozma's harder because Omega Weapon's on a pattern. Ozma isn't. Ozma's a nightmare, and there's like. Again, you can choose whatever party you want at this point in the game, and you can do like single person Ozma runs and stuff like that. I couldn't do it like that. I had to do all 4 characters. Real hell of a challenge. Well worth the trophy you get for him when you beat him. It's a shame about the other trophies in the game though, isn't it? Quale, I've never played Quale. I never bothered with it because you've got to get 99 frogs to fight him. Couldn't be bothered. Just. And you know what? He's D tier for the sheer fact that the requirements to get him are too ridiculous. Sit there and catch so many frogs. Frog minigame's fun, but letting the ponds regenerate is just sucky. So I'm going to put him in D tier for that. So even though I fought him, even if he was an amazing boss fight, which I don't think he is, I've seen him played. It wouldn't be worth it with that flipping 99 frog thing. So I'm going to put him down below. Controversial maybe. He's got the most HP in the game, but what does that mean? You know. Next we have the Nova Dragon. The Nova Dragon's an 8th tier fight. Really hard. Like you fight it as you go into Memoria, and it's like all these dragons attack, and then you fight the Nova Dragon. A lot harder than the Silver Dragon. Yeah, a really good boss fight. I think it's harder than most of the other boss fights on Disc 4. It's like it hits you like a ton of bricks, and I think it's one of those ones where I never quite got the pattern down on how to beat it, because you've got to fight it in as you go into this weird sort of world when you fight it. And it's tricky. If you trance, you're alright, but if you don't, you're screwed. Maliris is the next to the 4 Fiends. Well, actually, the 4 Fiends, and I reckon they're all B tier bosses. You know, they're not like on their own. They're not particularly memorable. The only one of all of them, I think Maliris is the best. I mean, they're cool because they're a throwback to the first game, Final Fantasy 1. But again, if you've been able to fight them with the 2-person party system, it would have been cooler. You know, it's a nice nostalgia trip, throwback to all that stuff. Maliris is the best because it has this sword dance thing at the end. They're just, you know, they're really cool throwback bosses, and they're hard bosses, but none of them are memorable on their own, in my opinion. I think the arena you fight Tiamat in, with the eyeball in the background, is pretty cool. The rest of them, you know, they're just tough bosses. So, you know, not much to say about them other than that. Hades is A tier. Hades is, I think, was supposed to be the final boss or something like that. I think there was something about it, or I don't know, it was supposed to be in place of Ozma or something. I'm not sure. Basically, you fight him in this secret area, and you fight him with the Hunter's Chants or Festival of the Hunt music playing in the background, which is really cool. And he has this like countdown attack, and then it like curses you, I think. So he's really tricky. You've got to like work on a time, so you've got this like constant threat that he's gonna attack you, and you've got to like deal as much damage as you can quickly. And if he dies when you kill him, he opens up a synthesis shop. You can buy stuff out. He's like, he has a change of heart. He's like, oh, I've got a shop now. Which is quite funny, quite quirky. but one hell of a boss battle. Like, you go into this like black world, a bit like the Void, like similar to where you fight Diablos in Final Fantasy VIII, but like even darker. So it's a really scary location to fight something. But like the Hunter's Chance that you're supposed to be fighting the ultimate monster, he's nowhere near as hard as Ozma though. But you know, it would have been it's a good fight. I like it. Next we have Deathguise. Now Deathguise is a bit disappointing for the there's no boss rush here. There is. You've got 2 bosses in a row, but it kind of like you can save after Deathguise, so it makes it a little bit less impactful. So I'm going to put it at B tier. It's relatively tough. I think personally, like, I understood what they were doing for design wise. They had a Nova Dragon at the beginning of Memoria because you've been attacked by loads of dragons, and then had Deathguise as Kuja's pet. It would have made more sense structurally to have the Nova Dragon as like the Super Saiyan form of the Silver Dragon or whatever, but just before Kuja is its pet on a boss rush. That would have been better, because it's hard for that boss there. It seemed, it may be like what they did, because this boss here felt harder than Deathguise. So it seems like the way they've done it is that, you know, Deathguise throws meteor at you, but it's you know, it's not part of a 3-person boss rush. You can go and save and then fight Kuja again if you want. So it's really whatever this boss does to you, Deathguise does to you, doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you can throw everything you've got at it and then go and heal. So if it was a boss rush, it would have been a lot better. But, you know, a little bit disappointing. Now, Trance Kuja, I love Trance Kuja. It's the best fight in the game, I think, probably. I just like thematically the fact that this guy's been, you know, a thorn in your side for so long, and you just go up against him. The music when you're fighting him is incredible, and it's this like grudge match. It uses Flare Star on you, and it's quite tricky. I remember like taking a lot of attempts at it as a kid. It's really, really good. It's a good boss battle. And you know, when Kuja, the animation Kuja does when it's summoning, he's got arrogance on his face when he's summoning his magic, like your pests that are in his way, and it's just really cool. The best boss battle in the game, in my opinion. Not as hard as some of the other ones, but just really, really cool. And like with Beatrix, he does kill you at the end, but you've already beaten him. Like he says, I think he says, "Ugh, I'm going to die anyway," because you've bettered him. That's where it's better thematically than fighting Beatrix. He still does the whole like, "I'm going to wipe your party out." You know, it's kind of like a "if I die, you die too" kind of thing. But you know, you've rattled him. You've got him. You know, he's been rattled because he's realised that he's got a limited lifespan earlier in the game, and he's been rattled again by the fact that even at its most powerful, you still managed to beat him, and it's just worth it. And then we have the surprise ending battle, the ending battle with Necron. Now Necron, C tier. He's not bad, but you know, like, who is he? He just comes out of nowhere. Now, what they did in Final Fantasy 16 with Ultima, and if you look at Necron's design, it looks a little bit like Ultima. It's much better. Like Ultima's like, spoiler alert for Final Fantasy 16, it's like this other being in like a different parallel world, which kind of feels like what Necron is. Ultima is what Necron wants to be, basically. And I think they went with that idea and developed it for Ultima. Should have been, what would have been better is if we'd had earlier on in the game, we'd had hints that Necron was around. But you kind of saw the architecture, it's Terran, but it would have been better, in my opinion, if that had been what they'd gone for with Necron. And the boss itself is frustrating. You know, it just throws Grand Cross at you. I think there's loads of like different physical, there's loads of like status element things get thrown at you. So you've got to really be leveled up and like have as many defenses as you can. I don't think you can defend against all of them, which is really annoying. And I think it's random what it throws at you. So yeah, it's hard to strategize against. I know there's like a cheese that if you jump or something, you can get him to go onto a pattern where he just does a attack that doesn't really hurt you. Yeah, so I don't know how to do that though. But yeah, a bit bland compared to the rest. But what's good about the fight, and it's probably more to do with the fact that it's Trance Kuja actually, is at the end of that fight, again spoiler alert for the end of the game, is that Kuja rescues you from Necron, who tries to destroy you at the end. He beams you out at the last minute, and that's a really emotional moment. Kuja having a change of heart. So yeah, like, just summarize, I mean, I'm surprised that like most of the bosses are pretty middling for this game. Like I remember in 8 there were more really, really good bosses and then some rubbish ones. Like here most of the bosses are pretty solid. There's a few forgettable rubbish ones I don't like, and there's some really, really good ones I love. But you know, most of them are quite middling. I think this is like yeah, I think
they went for more of a, in 9 they went for more of a story driven boss encounter thing. I mentioned in my 8 video about Fusion and Raging should have been more like that. And the mechanics of the bosses were in this, none of them are too hard apart from Ozma, which is really hard, like Hades, which is pretty tricky. Most of the bosses are relatively easy to beat in the grand scheme of things, and you know, they're not challenging from an RPG perspective, they're challenging from an emotional story perspective, and I think they should probably have gone in a bit more all in with that, I think, because some of these monsters in the middle tier, there's no emotional connection with them at all. And I think if they'd been able to do the boss rush split into 4 parties thing with the 4 fiends, it would have made them a bit scarier and a bit better in that sense. Then, like, you know, Valia Pira or whatever, like, there was no emotional stakes in any of the Ulva or Valia Pira bosses. So yeah, it was a bit, you know, a great game. But yeah, no, they went for like you sort of like the enemies with faces. Let's put it that way, were more memorable because there was more to them, and the story drove the game a bit more. I think, but brilliant game. I'm not knocking it. But yeah, Trance Kuja is the best boss fight in the game. Thank you for watching. Let me know what your favourite Final Fantasy IX bosses are in the comments below. See you later.